This episode of ArcSpeak is brought to you by ARCAT. Are you the BIM jockey for your firm? Are you used to the grind of using broad search engines or searching for manufacturer sites only to find they don't have BIM?
Are you wrestling with outdated or poorly built objects? It's time to use ARCAT.com. ARCAT is a free library of over 7,500 BIM objects and systems, all available in multiple formats. Even better, each object is high-quality BIM based on actual manufacturer products.
And you don't even have to register to access ARCAT's BIM library. Just head over to arcat.com, that's ARCAT.com, and start downloading the BIM objects you need. And thanks to ARCAT for sponsoring this episode of ArcSpeak.
Welcome to ArcSpeak, the podcast that talks about what it's like to work in the profession of architecture.
Welcome to episode 159 of the ArcSpeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan. So on this episode, guys, I wanted to talk a little bit about something that we've talked a little bit in the past about, and that's leadership classes that I've been taking for both, project managers, for future office leaders and things like that. And one of the things that we were doing, which I thought might be kind of fun for us to kind of try out, is kind of scenario role playing. Mm-hmm. And what we did was, we had different, we've got leaders in the in these courses that are basically, from people who are newer to the firm, who don't really know, the way that we do things in the office. That we've got people who are just new to leadership roles, all the way through to the president of the company. And, so there's a wealth of knowledge and experience that you'll get from each of these people, and even, down to the people who've really never had a leadership role, but, may, from, kind of working in the trenches, understand how they would have liked to have handled a situation or things like that. And so it was actually really fun to go through all these different scenarios. And what I was thinking is maybe we could just go through a single scenario. But we've all had, where we've had to deal with, maybe an unruly client or deal with all sorts of different, scenarios, different egos, different, attitudes and things like that. Sometimes agendas, and stuff. And so, we had, what was fun about it is we had all sorts of different scenarios, and I swear that, some of these scenarios, I was just I kind of looked at, some of the people who were passing them out for us to review them. I was just did you use my scenario that I told you about? Just no.
It just close to home.
Yeah, these are really close to things that I have dealt with before. And so I just wanted to offer you guys up one. And so, I kind of...
So before you read it, the purpose of this was kind of, I would assume, just to get a lot of different takes on how to handle this kind of situation. So,
absolutely.
So
yes.
there's a small group that is going to kind of live role play this particular scenario.
Yes.
Each group gets a different one. And then afterwards, there's kind of you take it apart and critique it. And
yes,
because there's lots of people in the room who've had that experience or how they've dealt with it. And there's not necessarily a right answer, but the goal is to kind of get a lot of different perspectives.
Oh, true. Yes.
Okay.
That was totally the take that we were trying to go for. Is there are multiple different ways to handle it, and there's even sometimes there are right ways and sometimes there are wrong ways to handle it. And
then there's also people who have never been in a situation like that, so they're going to get a little bit of exposure.
Exactly.
In this case, to see how people handle things. And I think one of the cool things about this kind of way of doing it is that you get exposure to see how different people approach different problem solving, and then you start to learn more about them specifically.
Yeah.
Which is cool because as you work your way up, this is something that I mentioned in the last episode, but one of the things that I'm working on specifically this year is learning how to deal with different personality types, right?
Exactly.
So here you actually start to get to that. By answering this question the way that you answer it, you start to reveal somewhat of your personality type. And so people learn how to communicate with you going through these different role plays, which is like a side benefit.
Right. Exactly.
Cool. Now, Cormac, is this a class through the company you work for?
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So we've recently, and we've got, I guess each year we kind of train for future leaders or current leaders in the office, so that when somebody retires or somebody moves up to a different position or maybe leaves the company, that we have training for people who are going to be taking over those roles. Or and really the great thing about it is we really do have everybody in the office will take these courses, these leadership development courses. And, even if you're not in a leadership role at, like the traditional, like, you are the project manager and you are this. I mean, we're all technically leaders in the firm. Not only are we vested because we all own the firm, but, we're vested because we want a good working environment. We want good relationships with the people that we work with, and we want to be able to say that, this is the right way and the wrong way to treat people. And so, it's really good that, it's not just for those select few people, it's for everybody. And like I said, you're sitting in these courses with, people who are either fresh out of school, mid-career people, associate principals, partners in charge, project managers, the president of the company, all are in these courses at the same time. And, we were just talking about, and Evan just said, you're getting the advantage, you're getting the opportunity to kind of feed off of everybody else's experiences, even if you don't have those experiences. So I think it's it was a really valuable tool. And it's something that, I really kind of encourage everybody to kind of try to be able to do. But
so I was going to ask, is this like a third-party firm that comes in, teaches like you do this during the lunch thing, or is this like a day-long sort of thing? Just trying to set the stage a little bit for people if they're interested.
So what we have a third-party person who comes in, and she's actually teaches at Georgetown University leadership courses and things of that nature, and does a variety of different types of courses for, kind of like coaching and all sorts of different things. Sorry. So this is mine. It was 3 sessions. The first session was 2 days. Then there was 2 one-day sessions, where, when we had like a big group session, and that's why it was 2 days. And then we broke up into a smaller, cohort. And then we kind of came back all together with the bigger one to kind of like, do that. But, then there was tasks throughout, it's like coach the coaching, coach the coach kind of thing where, like I'd be paired up with a peer coach and, we would, check in on each other, periodically, just say, hey, how are you doing it? And then, there was like, daily goals and things like that, just to say, what you want to achieve throughout the day, and so it kind of helps you set, kind of like set a daily mindset for basically kind of success in managing or success in leading. Let me pull the word managing out of it. Let me just say success in leading. And that's really, I kind of have managing stuck in my head because of the scenario that I want you guys to kind of like for us to talk about. It's because it is kind of specifically about a manager, but it's a leadership course, and so it's
okay.
So let me get rid of management. Down with management.
Take them out.
All
right. Should I read this one?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. So this is the situation. All right. You're managing a team of staff working on one of your office's biggest and most important projects. It's nice to know that we have lots of most important projects. You have a very talented designer, Cal, who is leading the team of junior designers. Cal likes to work alone, and he's told you that he doesn't think the other staff are as capable and committed to the project as he is. We've all been there, right?
I was gonna say, yeah.
It's like the group project in school right here.
Yeah, I mean, we've all had Cal.
You've told Cal that he needs to coordinate with Cindy and Janet, who are supporting him on the project. Cindy and Janet have complained to you that Cal has not shared information with them, nor does he copy them in on emails to the client. As a result, there's been duplication of effort and wasted time. All right, so how would you as a manager handle this situation? Think about what you would say and who you would say it to. What questions might you ask? All right, so that's the situation that we need to role play.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yep, all been through this.
I think we've all been through this in one way or another.
You've either been Cal or you've been Cindy and Janet. Yeah. Or both at different times.
All right, so one of the things that we did when we got into our groups, because we had small groups once we were all assigned, we had, like I said, and this was in one of the cases where we're in a larger group. And so we broke up into, I believe it was like groups of 4, and each of us had a scenario to read through, and this one happened to be mine. And so when we read through it, first of all, we kind of like broke it down and, went, case by case, and it's just like, all right, well, what's going on? Some people were kind of role played, like, who Cal was, and kind of like where Cal was coming from, and others, were in the Cindy Janet role, and others were in the manager's role. And, so we kind of played it in all sorts of different, avenues of approach, because, typically there are, many sides to the story when it comes to, kind of like conflict or whatever. But, so, we can approach it in any different scenario or situation, but, just on first blush or first take, what do you guys think about what Cal's doing?
I'm going to jump in real quick and just say that, if you're, I'm going to apply this to my office, because we have, I don't know how many people I have in my location, probably about 250 people. And let's say half of those people, or maybe a little bit more, are on teams working on projects. The rest is like office support staff and
most important projects.
The most important projects. All right. So I would say that, and I'm going to apply it to that situation, because if you're talking about somebody who's leading a team of junior designers, it kind of fits, right? And so
right.
Cal likes to work alone is a red flag to me.
Oh, absolutely.
And the reason I say that, that works in some offices, but it doesn't work in my situation. And so I can definitely see some parallels with different personalities in the office, because there are personalities who do like to work alone. But if they're leading a team of junior designers, that becomes problematic. It's tough. There's a lot of lone rangers out there, and they do their best work that way. And I don't want to diminish that, because that's an honest, that is how some people like to work.
Yeah, but you've kind of honed in on one of the things that I honed in on, almost immediately. Is like you have Cal, who, is the senior designer in this situation, but he's supposed to be leading, and again, big air quotes, leading the junior staff of designers, but he likes to work alone.
It's hard.
Then he shouldn't technically be leading.
Yep.
You said he was a senior designer. It says in the scenario he's a talented designer. Doesn't necessarily mean he's the
If he's leading a team of junior designers, he is.
If he's leading a team, then he's the senior designer in this situation.
All right, fair enough.
And, regardless of, where he's at, he's the talented designer that is, leading other people. But if he likes to work alone, the first thing, I kind of put it back on, going into my mind of, being a project manager and stuff. It's just like, well, if I know Cal is like the lone wolf that likes to work alone, I need to work within the realms of, his limitations of, not basically being a leader, but being a contributor to the team in some fashion, and find somebody else, because you're not really ever going to foster any type of leadership out of Cal.
Right.
Or any kind of like mentorship out of Cal, because he doesn't want to be in that role. He wants to be
He's
a designer.
not wired for that role,
but he doesn't
potentially.
Exactly.
Yeah, so then as far as it comes down to like the communication issue here, where Cindy and Janet have complained to me that Cal has not shared information with them, nor does he copy them on emails to the client, which has led to other problems, right? Duplication of effort, wasted time.
Right.
And I think one of the
How many times have we been through that?
other things that I'm reading into it would be that Cindy and Janet don't really have ownership in the project because they're not privy to the information that's going on, right? So they're probably feeling
Right.
like they just don't know what's going on. They don't feel like they get to own the project in a way that Cal's kind of hoarding the information to himself, right? So I'm reading
Right.
into it a little bit, but that's what we get to do because this is
Well, and exactly. But I mean, if you think about it, I mean that it is scenarios that we've, probably all dealt with in our careers one way or
Totally.
another. That, when you have somebody who is somewhat the lone wolf on a project team and they're doing it, or you have, multiple like leaders that are on the project together and, one person's doing one aspect of a project, one person's doing another aspect of it. And if they're not fully communicating through that and, you start to feel a little bit marginalized, the people like, say, Cindy and Janet don't really feel like they're, valued as part of the project team because they're basically, they're not being involved with, decision making. They're not being involved with the information sharing to the client. They're not being involved with, a lot of things. And so when they're doing work and, I can just imagine, I can see the scenario where, Cindy and Janet are working on a task that Cal's feeling like, well, they're not really up to that task. So he's going to do that task. And now you literally have two different people doing the exact same thing. The project is never really going to progress forward because, Cal could be working on higher, bigger picture things while, the junior staff are maybe working through details or something like that, or vice versa, and, where maybe Cal likes to get hyper into detailing something out. And, there's different ways that you could, the manager themselves could deal with how to utilize them. I mean, it kind of puts an interesting, a lot of onus on the manager themselves of understanding what the team's capabilities are and how to actually manage them. Because yeah.
So, all right. So let's get down to the meat of this. So how would you as a manager handle this situation? So, I've been in this situation before, and I think that
Fire Cal.
well, one of the things you can't do is fire Cal. You've got to make
Cal's
sure.
going to quit anyway because he's not happy.
I like how you're. I don't need to deal with this because he's not going to be here long.
Well, he may be very well right, but the problem is that Cal's misery is making your life and Cindy and Janet's life miserable as well.
I'm adding a little
I know.
realism here to the scenario because this exact same thing happened.
That's one situation. The other situation is they stay there and they just continue to do this over and over and over and over again. And so
what do?
You show leadership, right? You show leadership right here because you got to get Cindy, Janet, and Cal all into the same room at the same time and say, here's what I'm observing. This is going on. And the way that we do things here, people like us do things like this. We share information. We all get ownership in the project. And if for some reason Cal doesn't think that Cindy and Janet are as capable or committed to the project as he is, he needs to give them responsibility.
Now, do you say that to all three of them, or do you talk to Cal specifically about that particular thing?
I think you have to pull them all in so that everybody has accountability here.
Yes.
Because if you don't pull everybody in, then it just becomes a he said, she said kind of a thing, and it becomes very much a gossip kind of a situation. Where if all three are in the same place at the same time, that accountability is established so that as things move forward, we can actually test and see if it's working or not.
Now, how, as the manager,
leader?
Well, no, in this particular case, it's manager.
Fair enough.
So as the manager in this situation, and you've pulled all three of them in the room, and so now all four of you are in the room and talking about it. Do you facilitate the resolution, or do you let basically all three of them have their say and let them kind of work it out, let them lead themselves into a solution that's, or a resolution of the issues and stuff?
I would personally, at this point, allow them to work out how it needs to work between them, because everybody does have individual preferences when it comes to this thing, and at least those get to be expressed. And then we can always tailor that back to the way we do things here, so that the next time there's a team, everybody is on the same playing field as to how we do things here.
Right.
And I think that doesn't happen enough. I mean, this is a situation typed up and given out to groups to role play because it happens all the time. And because not enough times is there actually a way, and it doesn't mean that, these are the rules and these are the way you have to do it. But it's about making a culture of communication and about making a culture of shared ownership. And so, like, it's not even going to happen the first time you have this meeting, right, with these three people. It's going to be something that has to get worked out over time. Not everybody's just going to snap into shape and do it the quote unquote right way. But it's got to be something that's established over and over and over again. And I would assume that this same issue is going to come up again, and then you've got to have that meeting again, and that uncomfortable meeting.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the interesting thing about this is, going about it by pulling all three of them together and having the conversation as a group. It kind of, you have these. If you do it separately, if you go to the, pulling Cal off separately, and you have that, and you go to the he said, she said type scenario, it's really hard to kind of, work through those things, but to kind of put them all in the same room together, each person is, as you said, holding each other accountable for, Cal can say, okay, I feel like you're unable to complete this task, and so I would like to do that. And then they would be able to say, no, they actually can have the conversation and the dialogue, and, hopefully you're there to kind of just mediate it a little bit and make sure that, everybody stays professional about it, but not really interjecting too much because, as you said, they're trying to work through this situation because it really is a situation between the three of them, and you're not really there to be the problem solver. You're there to be the mediator at best. And so, and it holds people like Cal accountable for, his actions and the way that he treats people and, and the lack of communication and things like that. And so he realizes, okay, I see that, the way that I do things that, work best for me aren't really the way that things work for the team. And Cal may say, hey, I just can't work this way, and Neil gets what he wants, and Cal's out of there, Or but the problem is that if you kind of ignore it, or if you just kind of try to troubleshoot it, in a manner that might not actually work for the team, it may actually work, to a greater disadvantage that you lose both Cindy and Janet. They're like, what?
Totally.
This is a bad situation. I'm out of here.
Or what I've seen happen, which I think is kind of tragic, is that nobody says anything, and then just nobody wants to work with Cal ever.
Right, exactly.
If we just keep beating around the bush here and saying, okay, well, Cal can have this special project because then that way he doesn't have to work with anybody, doesn't help anybody, doesn't help the firm, and it just creates further problems down the road. And so this is the kind of thing that actually has to be dealt with on an ongoing basis, because you can't have a bunch of people that nobody wants to work with who all get to do whatever they want whenever they want to do it. Right. And we've all seen that happen too, I think. So if you start to create a culture of not addressing issues like this, Cindy and Janet will never want to work with Cal again. Cal will just find other people who are not as capable or committed, right? Because that's what he does.
Right. He'll find another person to complain
exactly. About. And those people do leave, right? If the morale is really bad with this person, with Cal all the time, everybody who works with Cal ends up leaving the company because nobody wants to work with Cal, or there's not enough other projects to work on.
Right.
It's a huge problem. One of the books I would recommend reading, one that I read last year, is called Radical Candor, and this book is just based on, just being honest, right? And it gives specific strategies and ways to do that. Where I think the longer that we're out of school, where we all went through this, and this is generalizing, but we all went through this process of learning how to get a thick skin, right? Going through crits and juries and all that kind of stuff, and you had to defend your ideas and you had to explain why you're passionate about this particular thing in this way, and we either you figured that out or you didn't, whatever. But I think the longer that we're out of school, the thinner our skin gets over time, and it becomes a thing where a lot of people avoid these kinds of situations as much as they can because they're not comfortable. And so this book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott, I'll put a link to it in the show notes. It's a great book about how to be real with the people that you're working with and how to call people on the carpet in really approachable ways so that things get better. I mean, we've talked about the jury and the critique process on this show before, and the goal is to make the thing better. And that doesn't, that applies in this situation too, right? We're trying to make the situation better. We're trying to move forward and make progress and not continue to do things in the way that this has been presented. So I would recommend that book. It's been a fantastic tool for situations like this that people have to deal in leadership situations.
Interesting. Like it.
Yeah,
I'll send a link to you guys and put them in the show notes.
So since we're mentioning books, I'm going to mention one that I think could assist in some guideline. Evan, I like what you said, having the 3 people in there and setting the leadership goal, which is, this is how we do things here, right? And then allowing them to work their way through it, to me, makes a lot of sense. Is you have set the goal, you've set the leadership, what I'll call the leadership goal for the firm, and then they work it out amongst themselves. I like that approach. And then one of the books I'm going to mention is one that I listen to every few years or so when I think I need a refresher, which is a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. I don't know. The title to me sounds, how is it?
Cheesy?
Well, no, not cheesy. Just
it sounds a little harsh, right? Like
it sounds harsh. Yeah, it sounds a little harsh. But what it's really trying to do is get you to think a little differently about how you approach people and how you deal with situations much like this. So I think there's some lessons in this book that would help with this situation, which is, some of the fundamentals, which is not criticizing or condemning or complaining, and being sincere, appreciation, and then basically one of the fundamental techniques in handling people. The third one is arouse in other person, an eager want. So, I mean, taking those 3 approaches here in this situation, right? Not criticizing Cal, Cindy, or Janet for doing what they do, right? They're their own people, that this is who they are. So you can't criticize them, because if they do, then they're going to get defensive, and you have a 3-way bitch session, essentially, which is what you're trying to avoid.
Yep.
And then being appreciative. They're all bringing something to the party, right? And you have to communicate that. And then you have to find a way to make them eagerly want to work together, right? And that's, I think, part of setting the leadership goal here that you stated at the beginning here is, this is our goal, and we want them to get to that goal. Because if they don't want to have that goal, then they're working in the wrong firm. I think is what we're getting to, is what you were talking about, is they're either going to like this, right? You're setting the culture of the firm.
Exactly.
And if they don't like that culture, if they don't like this expectation that you have as the culture of the firm, then it's time to move on.
Right.
And they'll realize that themselves, right? Because you're stating the goal here, the leadership role, and you're telling them this is the way we do things, right? How do you guys work that out? They can work that out, but if they choose not to, then then they'll go somewhere else.
Well, but I think there needs to be a little bit of flexibility in the way things are done. If there are, if you've got Cal, the big talented designer, and you've got a bunch of junior designers who are probably equally as talented, and there's different ways of working with them that are somewhat out of the norm or the standard of the office, at least you set, going back to what Evan was talking about is, you're setting the standard for what is typically done in the office, but the flexibility needs to be there to say, okay, this is how we typically do this, but as a manager, as a leader of the project, you need to recognize what are people's strengths and limitations and kind of work with those. So you have a little bit of flexibility, a little bit of, deviation from the standard. I'm not saying, completely throw the standards out. It's just like, how do you work with people's limitations within, kind of the standards?
Well,
and stuff?
The way I was listening to Evan's comments were not so much 1, 2, 3 step, this is how we do things necessarily, as here are the goals we have. In other words, we communicate, we do this, we do that.
Yeah.
And how exactly you do that is up to you guys to work out. Right. So what I'm saying is, yes, they have the ultimate flexibility to reach the goal. How do you reach the goal? That's for them to decide. And you can be as flexible as you want, but everybody has to understand we communicate here. We share responsibilities.
Yeah, what you're talking about, right, Neil, is you're talking about values, right? And that's what's important.
Okay, yes.
You don't need to worry about communicating exact ways of doing things or behaviors. It's like, here are the values and why they're important. How can you guys make that fit, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I was going to say, I mean, you started off saying standard, and that was kind of what I was reacting to, but then you kind of like retacked it to say, project goals or the goals that we're trying to achieve, and that's really how it should always be kind of presented at the beginning of it. It's like, these are the project goals, these are the project expectations, and here's what we need to do to meet them. It doesn't mean that, this is the 1, 2, 3 pattern of, how you go about achieving it, but these are the goals that we set out, and, your strengths and your weaknesses are what's going to get us there, one way or the other. Like I always say, it's like, okay, when you sit down and start talking about project expectations at the very beginning of the thing, one of the things that we like to do is always talk about, and we actually talked about it in this particular scenario when we were in our group, is sitting down at the very jump of a project saying, what are the, these are the goals and expectations of the overall project. Now, what are the goals and expectations that each person would like to get out of the project as they move forward? Because then as the leader of the project, you're able to basically put people in the right situations where, if they are going to be working with Cal, what do they want to get out of working with Cal? How do these junior designers then learn from Cal in the best way possible? And now we know that, Cal's not, a big team player. So maybe we don't necessarily put him in a mentoring or leadership role, but in a role that, provides as much guidance to the project as we possibly can, but also, kind of works within the limitations or the kind of like preferences of Cal, and so, being able to kind of lay all of those goals and expectations out at the very beginning, both on the macro level and the micro level, it works towards, having a more successful project. And, everybody probably won't be, getting to the point where, they're at a point of quitting because the team isn't functioning right. Everybody knows what everybody's trying to get out of it. And hopefully as professionals, we're working towards, enabling everybody to be able to have those, those successes on the project and not kind of being roadblocks.
Yeah. So this is just one situation that you get to deal with on a weekly basis, and welcome to the firm.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, there's so many more.
Exactly.
There's so many more.
I really actually, to go back to this, I really kind of totally dug the way that, these case scenarios were kind of led to us because, you did have the opportunity to sit down in a group with, a variety of different experiences and go through all of those. And I thought it was rather enlightening, because we were able to learn from, okay, so how does the president of the company, who she's got, maybe 25, 30 years of experience in, the profession, versus somebody who's got maybe 15 years of experience, and versus somebody who may have 5 years of experience. And so you're coming to it from a variety of different viewpoints and a variety of different experiences, and you can both learn from and, take away and kind of grow and maybe the experience from somebody who's only got 5 years of experience, as maybe, the person who was in the Cindy and Janet situation, maybe the person who's got the 30 years of experience can learn from that and say, oh, okay, so this is the way, the kids of, I don't want to say kids of today, the younger staff, this is the way that they're, the way that they work. And, the way that I used to work when I was in their situation, their level of like 5 years or less is completely different than when I was there. So, let me learn from, their new experiences and stuff like that. So it was really kind of refreshing to see so many different viewpoints and understand how, because it's like leadership isn't linear. It's, leading up, leading down, learning from
Lead
all
from
of
where
the
you
different,
are.
from everybody. Exactly. And so it was really great to kind of go through these scenarios.
Cool. All right. Shall we move on to the next topic?
Sure.
So we got a write-in from a friend of the show, and basically what they wanted to know was they heard that they can obtain an architect license with a 2-year architecture technology degree instead of having to complete a professional architecture degree. So they would like to get our opinion on this matter, whether it's true or not. And if it's true, what are the pros and cons of becoming an architect without getting a professional degree in architecture?
As we were talking about this as being one of the topics, I have a very good friend who started architecture school, and he was, through circumstances and stuff, got, a year or two into his degree, and unfortunately had to drop out of school to, take care of things and earn money and things like that. Like, life circumstances happen to everybody. But he never really left architecture. He got a job as a draftsman with an architecture firm, and worked his way up through the years. And it just, life kept happening. So, he really couldn't go back and finish his degree. But he started off as a draftsman, then was working as, a project architect and doing a lot of, let's use the term architect in this particular case. He was a project designer and was working on that, and then, started working his way up as a project manager. And, through the course of, 13, 15 years, has gained a lot of very valuable experience on how to manage a project, how to detail a project, how to work with clients and manage clients, and, almost everything that I do, he does. He doesn't have a degree. I have a degree. There's nobody I would, trust on a project more than this guy. I mean, he absolutely knows everything about it. Whether or not he's got the strengths in the design based off of the design as it was, taught to us with like, the limitless possibilities and the way that, we like stretch our minds in architecture school. And I think that's one of the values that we get from architecture school is when we are given projects with, limitless opportunities, it lets us go in any and every direction. So we're thinking about so many different things. When we get into the profession, then, we're kind of faced with all of these constraints, and we don't, maybe we don't fully explore every opportunity that we would, because we know that, okay, well, I'd really love to go in this direction, but I know how expensive that direction is. And so maybe I'm going to taper back my expectations and I'm going to kind of approach it this way, and so I don't know, where he's at, design wise, when it comes to things like that. But I know that, in his particular case, there's, nobody that I would, would trust more to be able to take a project from scope studies all the way through to construction administration. In the limitation that he's faced in his career because he doesn't have his degree was a challenge that he had to meet and exceed and basically show everybody that just because I don't have a degree, I can do this job to, 100%. So fast forward to, I got a text from him yesterday. He finished his second to last test for the AREs. In the state of Maryland, you can sit for your AREs after 10 years of work experience under the guidance of a licensed architect. And so NCARB will recognize your hours. There's 10 years. So after 10 years of working the profession, and he's got to meet all of the AXP goals that everybody else does. There's a few more challenges that a few more hurdles that he had to go through. And he has more than 10 years of experience, but he's got 10 years of experience. Think about, how much experience you actually gain over the course of 10 years and all of the different scenarios and everything else. I know a lot of the projects that he's worked on because we work together. And so I know that a lot of the challenges that he's faced, a lot of people don't even face challenges like that, throughout their entire career and, as a degreed professional. So, so yes, so basically that is a very long example of you are able to get a architectural license, but there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through. And there's a lot of proof of, experience and understanding that you have to go through just before you're able to actually, get all of your criteria for getting your AXP accepted and things like that. But like I said, we've heard numerous stories of people who go through the apprentice type programs and don't really have degrees. We go through history of all these different, architects that don't have degrees in architecture, but we still study them. Yeah. We still, revere them as masters. And, so it is absolutely able to. Because think about it. Architecture is just as much a state of mind as it is a degree, a piece of paper in hand. So, I will answer just from my own. And I've worked for and have been mentored by several people who only have, what would, I guess it would be a Bachelor of Science in Architecture, which is only a 4-year
like
degree.
How you put it down there by
not the full.
The word only.
So and I was, well, so like I have a Bachelor's of Architecture. So I've got the 5-year professional degree, which, qualifies me to, sit for my exams and all of that other stuff almost immediately afterwards. Whereas people who have a Bachelor's of Architecture, a Bachelor's of Science in Architecture, like in the state of Maryland, I know in the state of Florida, you cannot sit for your licensure with just your Bachelor's of Science in Architecture.
Right.
So you go get your master's degree, and then you qualify for it. So it's your post-professional degree, and then there's your professional degree level, and then there's your 4-year level. And so in certain jurisdictions, you can sit for it with just the 4-year degree, and in the case of my friend, you can sit for it without a degree. He's got a degree, but it's just not in architecture, and he's got all of the experience and everything else that anybody would expect a licensed architect to have. And hopefully in a few short weeks, I will be getting another text from him.
Cool.
That says, I am done.
Yeah.
I'm sure with a few colorful words added to it. But
except when you do it, you don't tell anybody. So
because that is very much what it's like.
All right, Neil, what do you got for our friend of the show?
Well, the first thing I'd point out is what's great about this profession is that there are many aspects to it and many ways to be involved in it. And this is another way, right? You don't have to do the traditional 4-year, 2-year program or 5-year program, IDP or AR, what do they call it?
AXP. Yeah.
AXP now. And you don't necessarily have to do everything the way you traditionally do it, and you can still be someone who contributes to the architectural profession. Let's put it that way. And so I think that's what's great about our profession is that, and all of those people, and we've talked a little bit about this in previous episodes, is that all of those people are necessary to our profession, right? Everybody from the person doing the CAD or the BIM drawings all the way up to, as we were talking earlier, the leader of the firm or the manager or somebody like that. And they all have different requirements or special skills. And so I think that in this case, someone who has a 2-year architectural technology degree and then gets the experience and then goes on to become licensed, I think they're all very valuable because you're bringing a different sort of perspective to the profession. And I think it's all valuable. And I think I've seen, I've worked with people that haven't done it the traditional way, and they're leaders of firms, or leaders at firms, I should say. But most people do it the more traditional way, and that's fine. So I would just say that I think it's great that our profession, you can be involved in it and not have to do the traditional way. And I think it's totally valid. And I think once you get to a point, as Cormac was mentioning, his friend's 10 years of experience, much like, I mean, some people, it's rare somebody asks me, hey, where'd you go to school? It's more, what have you done? What sort of projects have you done? Stuff like that. It's sort of like your high school GPA becomes really irrelevant once you finish college.
Once you get into college.
Once you get into college, yeah, maybe I should say it that way.
Yeah.
But the point is that these certain things, how you gained your experience, becomes less important once you have that experience.
Yeah, there's so many ways to get there.
Yeah, and that's actually, you bring up a point. It's the good thing about this profession is there are avenues of, becoming a licensed architect that don't follow the traditional path. And like I said, we study and revere, numerous architects like, let's say Ando, is a great example of one that, has just got such a prolific career in architecture. And, we've got, coffee table books of his work and all of this other stuff. Never went to school.
That's awesome.
He was a boxer, and, and so, and he fought his way into architecture and pun intended.
Sweet.
Exactly. But I mean, so I really do appreciate the fact that, that we do have the opportunity to, because, this guy, my friend as an example, he's contributed a lot to a lot of really good and successful projects. And, to basically deny him, a piece of paper just because he didn't go to school, when, he's met every criteria of, any other registered architect. It's not to diminish the traditional, methods of going through it, because obviously we all did it, and we, I wouldn't give up going to, Auburn Architecture School for nothing. I mean, I absolutely loved the experience and I loved what it gave me. But, there are other ways of doing it and that are still equally as valuable to this profession. And, at the end of the day, I mean, aren't we really wanting the best people in this profession, the people who are really going to work their ass off, and people who come up through the trenches in a very non-traditional manner? They're the ones who showed the grit and the gumption to really work their ass off for this profession.
If you ask somebody how you should do it, they're going to tell you how they did it, right? And that isn't necessarily going to serve you the best. So I would say to our listener that you've got to design your life and spend the time how you want to spend it. So if you want to go to design school, then that's what you need to focus on. If you want to focus on the technical aspects of architecture, do that. If you want to learn how to program and then apply that in architecture, do that. I think that picking one way based on what somebody else says to do is not going to serve you the best. And so I think that kind of falls under what Cormac was just saying about the people with the gumption and actually kicking butt in this profession later on, is they're coming at it from a different set of life experiences that makes them who they are and makes them amazing architects, quote unquote, whether they actually are or not. Because we all know that you don't have to actually get licensed in this profession, and even if you decide never to get licensed, you can still hire licensed architects to do the work that you want to do. I mean, because we treat schools and the AREs and everything is treated as though you are going to become a sole practitioner, right? You go through an education, you go through pro practice class, you go through engineering class, like structural engineering, you go through all these things, you go through all these design studios as if you are the sole decision maker, doer of all. And then there's those of us who've gone on to work in larger firms where we know that we play a relatively small specific part to the bigger whole. And we don't get to do it all, and nor should we, right? You want to let people apply their strengths to make the complete team. And so I think that another thing you probably want to think about beyond how do you want to spend your time over the next 5 to 10 years, because you can do it in California too, right? I think it's 7 years here. If that's just what my memory is pulling up. I don't know if that's true or not. You'd have to look. But you could become a licensed architect going to technical school and then, interning and working in the profession under a licensed architect and getting all those hours signed off and doing all those things. But again, is that how you want to do it? Because there are so many ways that you can approach this profession. It doesn't. I think you should think about how you want to spend your time and also how much debt you want to incur. Right. That's definitely something that not enough people think about, and they're going to work their entire career paying that off. Right. To go to some prestigious architecture school. So I almost said pretentious and prestigious at the same time. It's one of those prestigious. Yeah, I don't know. It's one of those things though that you need to think about, because do you want to spend the next 30 years paying off your school loan so that you can call yourself a licensed architect? I don't know. Like, I can't decide that for you, but that's something that you should think about. One of the interviews that I heard on another podcast, friends of ours at Inside the Firm, Alex Gore interviewed Phil Reed at Autodesk University, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But he is, I don't know if you guys recognize that name or not, but he's one of the early people at Revit before Autodesk bought them. And so he's played a big role in a lot of architects' day jobs, and they may or may not know his name, right? But he's definitely contributed to this profession and continues to. He's involved at Enscape now. Everybody's using Enscape. Everybody uses Revit. He actually has his own kind of I want to say investment company now that's it's called Reed Thomas, but his name's Phil Reed, and I would look him up. I'll link to the show, but he basically lays out this whole exact scenario that our listener is writing about. Like, this is how he thinks more people should approach the profession to get what they want out of it, instead of waiting around and paying the dues and all that terrible, horrible stuff that have to work with Cal. Who wants to work with Cal? Right. So I think that there's definitely value in at least listening to some of these different options, and then really just take a hard look and design your own path. Right. And don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I mean, that's one of those things that, again, everybody's going to tell you how they would do it and how you should do it, but I don't think that they really know your particular set of circumstances or what you want to get out of the profession or how you want to contribute to it. And those are all things that, man, I wish I could go back in time and reconsider how I did everything. I mean, I may not be the same person that I am today, but it would be cool to have that as an exercise, to at least go through and say, here's how I want to contribute. Here's what I want to do. Because number one, never figured out where I am today from back then, but I also just kind of did it the way that everybody else did it. And I don't necessarily think that has served me the best because, it took me 17 years to get my license. So if your goal is to get licensed, which is what the letter sure makes it sound like, it's like, well, what's the fastest path to that versus the cost, right?
Right.
So you go to a state school,
right? Pay
as little as you can, or go to the technical school and pay the dues, and so the cost is less, but it takes a little bit longer, right? So there's lots of things to weigh there. You can go to schools now where you can get licensed right out of school, right? NCARB started that up a few years ago. So there's so many different ways to do it. How do you want to spend your time getting there? I think is something definitely worth thinking about.
All good points.
Yeah.
All right, let's wrap this one up. Remind everyone that this episode is brought to you by ARCAT. Thanks to them. We appreciate it. The music is by System Kid. You can subscribe to Archispeak on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play, or listen directly from our site at archispeakpodcast.com. You can follow the show on social media via Twitter and Facebook, and links to all of this can be found over at the site at archispeakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening, everyone, and stay subscribed.
See ya.
Have a good one.
you tell me